27 states in the U.S. are going broke. Now, video was put out, not this video, but what we're watching and reacting to today was put out just before the administration had changed, but more than half are going broke. And I want to know why. If you've been following the activities of DOGE, you can see that a lot of money has been wasted in the federal government. And I'm assuming that a lot of these states were relying on federal money. And if they were relying on federal money, then they probably don't have enough income coming in their own situation, their own state, which means they're being mismanaged. So I'd like to see what's going on. I want to hear comments down below. Remember, there's a newsletter and products down below. You can help us join us, stay in touch, like, share, subscribe. Always comment. Let's get into it.
State governments in the U.S. are running out of cash.
After meeting our obligations, we have very little money left.
All right, wait. First, I hate to stop so early, but are you saying cash or income, like accounts receivable? Are checks not being paid? Bills not being paid? Like, what's going on? All right. Oh, Massachusetts. Wow, we're running out of money. I'm sorry I'm ranting so quickly, but yeah, I live in Massachusetts and they tax everything. I'm having my third kid soon. Okay. By the time you're watching this, you might already be here. And I got to buy a car. To buy a car, I have to pay, I think it's 6% tax. So if I want to buy the car, I have to pay, I think it was like a $25,000 car. I think I have to pay $1,500 in taxes just to buy the car. Okay. If I go to New Hampshire where it's tax free, right up the road, okay, buy the car, there is now a use tax at the same price because I bought that outside of the state. So even if I go somewhere else and buy a car, the state is still going to tax me. And then they're going to have a registration fee. And then there's a few other fees on top of that. And it winds up being like $2,000 or $2,500 just to buy the car. It's almost 10% extra just to buy a car because I need a third seat now, because I need one more seat in my car. I'm ranting. Sorry, that was. We'll get into it. Sorry.
One count suggests that 27 states lack the necessary funds to pay their bills. The problem is most prominent in states like Connecticut, New Jersey, and Illinois.
Not only city of Chicago, but state of Illinois is running straight into a brick wall in terms of its finances. City of Chicago is facing $1 billion deficit. State's facing a massive deficit while also needing to bail out things like the Chicago Transit Authority. Chicago Public Schools is asking for a bailout. The state cannot afford these things.
States received about $800 billion from the federal government to kick off the decade. That spending obscured long-running issues.
What we're seeing is largely a return to earth from those pandemic surpluses.
We saw a big increase in income taxes. There was really like a bit of an economic boom.
States now are working with tighter budgets as the country's population and infrastructure ages. Even economically powerful states see trouble ahead.
To the degree that the states are relying on federal aid, it becomes a daisy chain of vulnerability.
State governments account for 15% of the nation's economic output, and they employ 13% of the U.S. workforce. So why are so many state governments going broke? And
hold on. 15% is too high because it's money taken out of the private sector's pocket. So really it's 15% of the private sector's money being siphoned and back in and then included back into the numbers. 13% is too high. This is my opinion. And I feel like I spoiled some of this in my earlier rant. What state do you live in? Do you have an income tax? What is the income tax? I'm in Massachusetts, and I think it's 6%. I'm pretty sure that is it. 6%. They tax everything. You let me know down below, and we'll continue.
And what can they do to repair their finances? State governments pay for much of the nation's systems of education, healthcare, transportation, and public housing, but they receive tremendous amounts of help from the federal government to do that. In 2022, federal grants covered 38% of total spending from state governments.
Way too much.
That was a bit more than usual.
During the pandemic, we saw a lot of one-time revenue, a lot of one-time expenditures that kind of had the effect of obscuring these long-term challenges that states faced.
The ensuing economic boom strengthened state coffers and increased revenues. The increase in revenue helped state leaders lower taxes and increase spending.
you, all of us together, delivered both the largest tax cut ever by a huge margin and the largest increase in teacher salaries in our state's history.
We understand that that's something that is politically palatable, particularly in the time of an election. It is something that if those receipts decline, we may see some future imbalances between, expenditures and revenues that states will have to correct.
Virtually every state made a tax cut. In some cases, this is a very intentional plan for states to, spend down these unexpectedly high revenues. On the other side, this could really reflect, tightening budget conditions and states needing to draw on those dollars to help make ends meet right now.
But the federal funds given to states will run out in 2026 as a cost of living crisis hits many parts of the country.
For too many, the cost of living is too high.
The higher cost of living is making some state leaders consider tax relief. That includes places like Wyoming and North Dakota.
States that do well are North Dakota, Idaho, South Dakota. And what these states really have in common is that they have a relatively limited fiscal footprint.
Many policymakers across the states, they did pretty well managing the pandemic era budget surpluses. A huge looming question out there is around the long-term affordability of the tax cuts and spending increases that were enacted.
Okay. A lot of this is monetary policy at the federal level. Constant inflation, a 2% inflation over time winds up eating into everything. We're shipping jobs and businesses 20, 30, 40, 50 years to other countries, and we're getting used to low prices on everything and regulations driving up the cost of everything. When the dollar keeps going down, which gives the perception of everything going up in price, or everything goes up in price, and then there's less good paying jobs to kind of equal that out, and then everything else is going down and being flooded by everything else. That's why prices keep going up. It's the same story across the board. No matter what the product is, prices keep going up, which is actually the dollar going down, money printing. We need to stabilize monetary policy. If I sound like some nutcase on the internet, that's fine. That's my opinion here. And states have been relying on the federal government rather than treating themselves like their own independent country, which is like we have states. The federal government is just, it has a few jobs, okay? Just a few jobs. And then each state is essentially its own little country. And it shouldn't be relying on 38% revenue from the federal government. That's insane. It should be like 5% when you need it and a little bit more in a crisis. And other than that, it should be the state funding itself and competing with the other 50 states. I sound like I'm not from Massachusetts.
State governments also have to manage long-running financial liabilities.
There are states like Illinois, Connecticut, and New Jersey. While these states really have accumulated a lot of debt after the great financial crisis, the main reason for their weak fiscal stance is the pension obligation.
Roughly 86% of public employees receive pensions. These are retirement plans that provide guaranteed income for life.
State and cities, in order to attract public servants, maybe paying them less money than they would make in the private sector, provide generous pensions, and they ended up getting behind.
If pension liabilities are fully accounted for, as many as 27 states lack the money needed to pay their bills.
What goes a little bit under the radar is that pension liabilities are an extremely expensive form of debt. The portion of the pension that is unfunded increases by 7% every single year.
This debt leaves states with less money to fund public programs.
So we're talking hospitals, we're talking about roads, we're talking about schools.
Take Illinois, for example, which owes money to former employees, but has less than half of the funds raised to pay them back.
We've seen analysis from JP Morgan that says in order to actually fund these enormously generous promises that were made decades ago, you would have to double the state income tax overnight in Illinois.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has steadily kept spending on areas like roads, in addition to education.
Penny by penny, we are still working together, saving important things for our state.
This requires tax increases to balance the budget. But that option may not be available to a state like Illinois, which already has relatively high tax rates.
Using taxes to raise additional revenue is limited.
Higher taxes tend to make people move, especially top earners. That's according to studies on states like California.
When the marginal tax rate increases by 3%, California loses about 0.8% in the tax base in the top income bracket. That's actually substantial because it's like 1% of the tax base in the very high bracket, which for the most part accounts for the majority of tax revenues overall.
Tired of cooking during the week? Cook
ad.
Unity sends you delicious restaurant quality meals straight to your door every week.
Okay. The revenue boom. Dude, there's just too much money coming. The states are too reliant. I'm repeating myself at this point. You know, that we're too reliant on the federal government. There's too much money. And then pensions. Here's the thing. We need assets. We need to stop treating the laborer, the worker, the business owner as the asset, as the income tool for the federal government. And we need actual assets. We need to own things, not people. People have to make more money for the government to make more money. And that's how we tax them, through the income. They take it out of their checks. Like, what if we owned something that we leased? Say, federal land. If we leased it for mining, generating money from that. I'm just giving you, obviously, it's not like the great, like a huge idea or a huge amount of revenue from that one idea. I know people are going to tear me apart for that, but but as an example, I remember in the 2020 election, I think the libertarians were talking about something about like the George Washington Bridge. Like, why don't we save money by leasing it to a private company where they cover the cost of the repairs, but they say like the Coca-Cola George Washington Bridge or something, and they get to put like a little sign on it. It's still the George Washington Bridge, but then they cover the expenses, which takes the tax burden off of the people, right? And they put it on a corporation. Yeah, some people think that's disgusting, but like get creative with your ideas of generating revenue so it doesn't have to come directly out of your pocket anymore. That's what I'm saying.
Moving forward, state governments must respond to emerging risks like more extreme weather, an aging population, and migration.
Migration, I believe, is going to be one of the biggest issues that will face the country.
In the 2020s, many Americans moved from high-tax areas into states like Florida, Texas, and North Carolina.
Coincidentally, those states that have those low income taxes, of course, they're attractive because of the climate, but they also have a high degree of climate risk. That's where it's going to be a real test for politicians in terms of managing a state budget.
Florida, for example, has drawn many people with its lack of state income taxes and business-friendly policies, but it sees risks ahead.
Florida is being challenged by a few factors that may be outside of policymakers' control. Within Florida's long-term budget assessment, they actually highlight Medicaid as a growing fiscal concern for the state. And of course, climate change and hurricanes hitting the state of Florida is a real concern.
I just want to add one comment. This is August 2016. I'm talking in February 2025. Florida is actually pushing to lower the real estate tax, to drive that down, probably to boost the economy a bit more, to pay for these things. So I just want to add that little nugget of information to this.
The federal government generally handles over 75% of disaster-related costs. Agencies like the Federal Emergency Management Authority, or FEMA, could quickly run out their budgets and require further funds from Congress.
I think anyone that's relying on FEMA to be leading the response, that is not the way proper storm response is.
There's a great concern of what that future risk is to the federal government, and that FEMA always becomes The bailout for people who haven't planned, it's a big number that's being presented to the taxpayer ultimately.
Nearly all counties in the United States are exposed to some sort of climate hazard.
I don't think people always associate a rising number of heat days with climate. I think the Midwest, being exposed to extreme heat, it can compound other hazards, which can be particularly impactful to agriculture. Crop production in the Midwest does contribute to that gross state product. You know, we've seen a lot of food inflation over the last couple of years.
Right now, the market isn't pricing in climate risks into securities, into municipal bonds. And so this becomes a future potential bill for state and local governments. Even in North Carolina, where Helene went up and disaster struck, could anyone have really anticipated that? You need to check on your health of your infrastructure, and can it withstand a severe stress test?
Climate change. Why do we think that people are doing this? I'm not a big, like, climate. Yeah, I believe in climate change. Climate changes. I mean, I sound like a complete moron when I say this, but it was hot when the dinosaurs were here. It was cold during the Ice Age. Climate changes.
The largest banks have to do stress tests coming out of the Great Recession. There's a similar concept that states actually do.
At least 20 states review their financial strength by conducting stress tests or long-term budget assessments. And all 50 are developing rainy day funds. These savings are used during economic downturns. Some states, like New Jersey, Montana, and Illinois, have very low savings in these funds. Other states, like Wyoming and Alaska, could finance their operations for months.
Alaska, very resource-rich state, a lot of its tax revenue is derived from oil prices and what's called severance taxes on that energy production. But it really is a double-edged sword for a state like Alaska, as well as other states like North Dakota and Wyoming. This dependence on oil prices and on those severance taxes has really become unsustainable. The point of optimism is that we're seeing more and more states do their assessment, they do their homework, right, to understand whether they are on a fiscally sustainable trajectory these days.
For example, the state of Maryland found budget gaps in its long-term assessment conducted in 2022.
And to the state leaders' credit, they focused on finding longer-term solutions by raising revenue, some spending cuts.
This trend has contributed to strong credit ratings for states across the board.
When you're in a healthy condition, right, that's when you're supposed to be planning for adversity and not reacting to it. This is really an opportune time for those issuers who are in geographic areas of high degrees of climate risk.
The level of annual issuance of municipal debt may have to double from about 400 to 450 billion to between 800 and 900 billion annually for the assets, the public assets in the U.S. to be adapted and more resilient to climate hazards.
68% of investment advisors in the United States see public debt as the top economic issue to the country.
I don't think politicians have any plan, really, to solve this in Illinois.
This is the most base thing I've heard through this entire video. There is no plan. If there's a plan now, there was no plan. There's been no plan since I was born in 84. Reagan was in office. He just got reelected like 3 days before I was born. There's been no plan.
And we saw a hint of this actually during the pandemic. Illinois was going to Congress asking for a $10 billion pension bailout. That is really the only answer they have because it's so politically toxic to keep raising taxes on Illinois residents.
There are certainly tremendous challenges going forward. There's still like a $1.3 trillion of pension debt outstanding. So that's big relative to, the annual revenues that those states receive.
All right, CNB Communist News Network. I don't know. Look, this is one hell of an interesting topic. I'll tell you that much. These states are going broke. They got to get their houses in order. The federal government is trying to do that right now with the Department of Government Efficiency. We're going to see how that shakes out. There's supposed to be like I should do a video on that. The DOGE dividends. Yeah, subscribe to the channel because they'll do a video on that. I don't know what else I'm going to get done for videos this week, but I upload daily, shorts, long form. We're selling stuff down in the description below. These are my affiliate links to great products. We got this computer down there. Thanks for hanging out. Leave your comments. Write your novel down there. I appreciate the work. I'll give you whatever feedback I think is reasonable. I'll see you guys in the next video. Share this with a friend, by the way.